If you were to open a time capsule containing all the artifacts of the cynical postmodernism and depraved celebrity trolling of 1995 to 1998, you would also find a VHS tape containing all 3 seasons of The Naked Truth. Téa Leoni plays Nora, a recently divorced former photojournalist who, despite being only 26, was already nominated for a Pulitzer back before her controlling and two-timing wealthy ex-husband destroyed her career. Now, she's trying to rebuild her reputation, but the only job she can get is for a sleazy tabloid run by Holland Taylor's ruthless Camilla. Brynn, Aaron, and Barry hop a fence, pull out the telephoto lens, and take a shot at figuring out why this show left the newsstands. We grew up during peak sitcom, Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince, but those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Byrne,
Aaron Yeger,
And Andrew Helmer as Barry.
a Radio Gizmo production.
Hello.
Welcome, one and all, to another fabulous episode of That Was a Show. Hi, Barry. Hi, Brynn.
Hey guys, how's it going?
You know, it's going pretty well. It's a sunny day here in the west end of Toronto. And yeah, we picked a doozy of a show to talk about. So I'm excited to get into it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It was. Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Why don't we just dive in?
Yeah. Let's dive in. Let's dive into the shallow waters of
That's good. That's a good line.
The Naked Truth. So, I will just admit right off the bat that I did not put a lot of care into choosing this show. This was a Brynn pick, but it was sort of from our bank of shows. And it's definitely a pretty recognizable show, at least to me. It could go definitely into the forgotten category because a lot of people out there don't really talk about it. You know, it ran for 3 seasons, but it just has a very, very interesting history. So The Naked Truth, created by Chris Thompson, followed the hijinks of Nora Wilde, the photojournalist, and her colleagues at The Comet, a tabloid magazine. It ran for 1 season on ABC from September 1995 to February 1996. It was canceled at the end of that first season, but then it was resurrected almost a full year later by NBC after a pretty hefty retool. It aired on NBC starting mid-season in January 1997 for 13 episodes. And then another season followed from September 1997 to May 1998 before it was canceled for good. A total of 55 episodes were made, and apparently 7 were unaired. And this is according to IMDb and like Wikipedia. I think it's a pretty reliable source on that. The most basic premise of this show is that Nora Wilde, is a prestigious photographer that is in the midst of a messy divorce from her blue-blooded wealthy husband. She kind of has her career ruined. Despite having been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, Nora can't find a good gig because her ex has sort of poisoned the well for her in the mainstream publishing world. The only place that will hire her is ultimately The Comet, which is a weekly tabloid, like the trashiest of the trash tabloids, and she's sort of lowering herself to take the job. And I would describe the rest of the series as her sort of having a downward spiral a la Breaking Bad. She goes from a person who has a certain level of prestige, not only prestige, but she has certain ethics about journalism that she sort of tries to uphold early in her career, and gradually she sort of resorts to the lowest common denominator while she's working under the influence of her editor at the Comet, Camilla. The show starred Téa Leoni as Nora and Holland Taylor as the cutthroat editor of the Comet, Camilla. Both Leoni and Taylor, as well as Mark Roberts, were in the cast for the entire run of the series, but several other cast members kind of came and went as the show was reworked a couple of times. So other cast members included, and they're all amazing, by the way, I just have to say, Jonathan Penner, Daryl Savad, Chris Elliott, Tom Verica, Amy Hill, Jim Rash, a very young Amy Ryan, Jack Blessing, George Wendt, but for only one season, and David Lee Smith. So a lot of these people kind of cycled in and out as her coworkers. And I do also have to say that for season 3, they went to a different tabloid altogether. So it's kind of crazy. Like, it's kind of wild how, and no pun intended there because her last name is Wild, how things kind of like evolved with this show. There were several notable guest stars, including George Segal and Mary Tyler Moore, who played Nora's parents for 4 episodes. Also, Tim Curry played Sir Rudolph Haley, which I can only guess is sort of like a Rupert Murdoch stand-in, but he was the owner of the Comet, as well as other newspapers and publications. John Lovitz also guest starred as a rival photographer. Sarah Silverman played a former child actor. Conchata Farrell was also in the mix, so we got to see our friend Conchata Farrell once again. Michael York played Leland Banks, Nora's ex-husband that ruins her career. That role is also recast in the retool later on, which is kind of funny. But he only appears twice in the entire run of the series. Also, several celebrities play themselves throughout the series. So because it's a celebrity tabloid, you get lots of cameos of celebrities playing themselves, including Anna Nicole Smith, Gary Marshall, Virginia Mayo, Charo, Morgan Fairchild, Sheryl Crow, Bob Saget, Dom DeLuise, Gary Coleman, George Hamilton, Rob Lowe, Suzanne Summers, Tawny Katane, which was like a tabloid kind of figure back then, Trisha Yearwood, Tom Arnold, Betty White, and wait for it, Tom Hanks. So that is an interesting one because, of course, he starred in Chris Thompson's first series that he created, Bosom Buddies. So he must have like really called in a favor.
Everybody in this room and the audience going, of course.
Yeah,
yes.
Of
yes.
course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course. Obviously.
Yeah.
Chris Thompson created Bosom Buddies.
Yeah.
We all know that.
Yeah.
Bosom Buddies, Hanks's finest work.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't speak to how significant these cameos were and whether they were actual full-on cameos or whether there was like, they were video clips and they were being sort of credited, but that's not to say that all these people are in the cast list on IMDb. So it's pretty interesting. So we watched the pilot for the purpose of this episode, and we also watched season 3, episode 22, which was the unaired final episode.
The grand finale.
Yes. And yeah, that's all I got as like a little intro here. Like that was a lot. I need to take a breath.
Okay, I'll give you a breath, and I'm going to give this comment right off the top here. So first of all, this is probably the least notes that I've physically written down on a show in a long time.
Which is interesting.
Even though I have a lot of like opinions and things to say about it, but as far as like noting very specific things, I have more just like a general vibe from the show. But right off the top, the basic premise, okay, that we come into in the first episode, and we'll talk in a moment about like what the set piece is and where, you know, the scene takes place. But just the idea that she's divorced from this rich husband, okay, has a Pulitzer Prize.
She doesn't have a Pulitzer Prize. She was nominated.
Nominated for a Pulitzer. She's a somewhat prestigious photojournalist.
Yeah.
Who is now divorced. They also very specifically note that she's 26 in that scene.
I know.
And so first of all, what? and then second of all, the premise that her husband, who is rich, she's divorcing him because he cheated on her a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's kind of an asshole, or at least that's what we're gleaning. We never meet the guy.
In that episode,
okay. We never meet the guy.
Yeah.
In the 2 episodes that we watch. And in that scene, she explains to these 2 other women in this bathroom at a courthouse that she turned down taking any money from him.
Yeah.
Homes, money, anything. And he's super rich. She just wanted her name back. And I'm like, first of all, you don't need his permission to take back your name that you had, your last name, prior to being married. In fact, legally, you could have just kept it all along.
Yeah.
Because this is the 90s. I don't know how things were in the past, but
it's very confusing.
He doesn't control your ability to use your original name. And why the hell didn't she take any money? She should have taken the money. Take the money.
I sort of took the name thing as a metaphor. Like
it's a metaphor.
She didn't mean she couldn't change her name back. She meant not that he wouldn't destroy her name.
No,
basically.
I know it's a metaphor, but the point is like...
No, I mean, not even like, I mean, even in a plot, it's a metaphor.
Yeah, no.
Like, she's just saying, I leave me alone.
Yeah, no, I don't...
Like, I want to start over.
I know. I know that. She wants to start over. She wants her to rebuild her reputation as a photojournalist, whatever. Yeah. But take the money.
I know.
Yeah, I agree.
I know.
Mean, she's terrible and has no morals as it is, so it's like, it doesn't really make sense that she wouldn't take any money, but for the purposes of the show, I guess.
So basically, so one thing I will say right off the bat is this show is sort of, it is about anti-heroes. It is about terrible people. It is like part of that trend of the 90s of showing the worst. Like the joke is like, look how bad these people are, and like poking fun at very, prescient things of the time, and like, just like how, like looking at the worst parts of society, right? Like, so it's meant to be bad people doing bad things, but it is like, it's offensive. Like, I will say it is a pretty offensive show. It doesn't hold up that way,
especially the pilot.
But the
pilot is really bad.
It is, and I apologize, guys, if either of you were offended in watching it. I didn't realize, like, it's definitely one of those things where I didn't vet it that well. But at the same time, it's worth examining because it is very 90s. It is maximum 90. That point in our culture in North America, at least. From like 96 to like 2000, it perfectly sort of like encapsulates that time, what it meant to be a person consuming media, what it meant to be someone who followed celebrities. Like it is like, and even just some of the political commentary, like I feel like this show just is the mid to late 90s. Like, it just is that time period.
I would say, like...
it's not like a microcosm of
like you talk about
everything that was going on.
Yeah, you talk about not having, like, vetted it super carefully. I'll say, like, when we review a show that is super obscure, that we've never heard of before, that lasted for, like, 5 episodes, it makes sense that we'd want to, like, be a little bit... careful as to which ones we pick and choose, and is it worth reviewing. This is the kind of show where it's almost inevitable, if we're going to be cultural critics of sitcoms in the 90s, it was inevitable that we would eventually review this show. Because
Agreed.
It is so... It's the distillation in its purest form of so many archetypes. It's like vodka that has no other flavors. It's just like a pure distillation, pure alcohol. This is 1995 to 1998 in its purest. Like, if you want to understand celebrity culture, gossip culture, sitcom humor, the kind of dark, edgy for the sake of edgy sitcom postmodernism of that time. This show, boom, it's in there. It
has all the things. Yeah. It has everything. It has all the tropes. It has everything. Barry, go ahead.
I would just say that on paper, and even when we started watching, I remember the title, and I knew going into this that Téa Leoni was in it. I remembered that. I also remembered Holland Taylor, so I must have watched it a little back in the day, but I kind of forgot the premise, I guess.
Yeah.
And it, like, let's get serious. For everybody else, like, this show was probably interchangeable at the time with Just Shoot Me, right? Like, Just Shoot Me and this, or like Just Shoot Me is a better version of this, but also not a super great show either. But way better. Yeah. Way better. On paper, it's a good premise, and it's a great premise for the 90s style anti-hero, like, not like we say 90s, that's not a 90s thing. That just, Seinfeld popularized it. It still happens today. It's become the de facto sitcom way of telling a story. Is usually you go with the bad people, and whereas now the outliers are the wholesome stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's great for that, but I feel like in no way does it accomplish that. Because they're constantly having the characters talk about how much better they are than what they're doing. And I'm like, it's not funny if you know you're bad. Like, it's not funny if you know that, like, if you watch somebody consciously do bad things over and over and over again, instead of them being clueless about it, it's not funny anymore. Like, Téa Leoni's character was the worst because you were just like, stop pretending like you're better than this. You're not.
She gives a lot of high-minded speeches about how she's better than this.
Oh,
but
my God.
she, to use that analogy, she breaks bad so quickly and easily.
She breaks bad instantly. I love it because
she sells out basically.
Instantly.
Yeah, instantly.
I don't know if the show meant this, but I found there was one scene that I found really interesting, and when she meets the other photographer who didn't bother to learn his name, but he was one of the more capable performers in the pilot, meets the other photographer, they're comparing their work, and he pointedly says, like, why is this black and white photo you took of a starving child, why is this any less offensive than what I did?
Exactly.
And I remember just being like, fucking
It's true. And that character is Nikki, who I think she has sort of maybe a will they or won't they with. Anyway.
Yeah, I think he only makes it 2 seasons. And then they replaced him with that other guy who was
with
like,
Jake. So there's lots of guys that come and go that she sort of has like a thing with. But that's a great point, Barry. Like, that specific moment, I was like, oh, that's like a very apt like commentary, because I feel like that's the kind of thing that the kind of commentary that's more made now than back then. Back then, it was still seen as heroic to take these exploitative photos of people suffering in developing countries and like other parts of the world, or in just like, it was like this like weird like tragedy porn for like upper class people that was considered prestigious. And I feel like there's a lot more criticism of that now. Whereas like back then it was kind of like, it would have been like a thing that, like, so I found that like a very interesting beat. But yeah, you're right. Maybe my comparison to Breaking Bad was not good because
no, apt.
It is. But she breaks
bad. Lest anybody forget, Walter White breaks bad immediately too.
Walter
White goes off the deep end almost as quickly as Téa Leoni.
Which honestly was, and I'm not going to take us into a whole detour on it, but it is one of my complaints about the show Breaking Bad, which I know like so many people were massive fans of. I generally enjoyed the show, but one of my biggest beefs with that show was how quickly he broke bad, because I thought it would have been a better show if his downward spiral into amorality took like 10 to 15 episodes, not like 1 to 2 episodes.
Well, I think the whole point is that he was always a terrible person.
That's the point.
I think everybody has the potential of being incredibly good or incredibly corrupt and terrible, because humans are just fucking humans, and like with the right or wrong circumstances, people have the potential to go to the light or to the dark.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's basically like this beat where she, she meets Camilla, and it's almost like she signs the deal with the devil, because it's like basically Camilla's the only one willing to hire her, because she thinks, here's a young woman who I can like shape in my own image, and like, let's see if she'll take the assignment. So I guess we'll just like run through the pilot just to kind of explain that it's a good way to explain this sort of spiral. So in the pilot, we immediately, like, we open with an exposition dump where Nora's in the bathroom and she meets 2 women who, appear to be, just women her age who are also dressed in kind of business attire. Turns out these women are sex workers who not only, who actually had ongoing relationships with her ex-husband. So basically she's explaining her circumstances to these 2 women. Explaining the entire mess of her divorce and how her career has been impacted and how she foolishly said she didn't want any money. So basically all of that is revealed in this scene in a really gross bathroom in a courthouse. And it's bathroom humor.
It's a good exposition dump in a place where you would take a dump.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, Aaron.
Yeah.
I had to.
It is kind of a clever scene, and the all 3 women, like, the thing that I really admire, the one thing that is admirable about this show is how many funny women are in it, and like how many good bits they get. Like, that is great. It basically, the show is very much carried by Téa Leoni and Holland Taylor.
Completely.
And even though the cast is stacked with like top-notch comedy people, those 2 really are the show.
Yeah. Even when we got around to watching the last episode, I was like, they're still the standouts.
Yeah. So basically this scene unfolds, and she's like, okay, like, after this like thing in the courtroom, she has to go to this interview at the Comet where she meets, as Barry mentioned, Nikki, the sort of photographer that is experienced in the tabloid world. He kind of calls her out for her BS and her like poor attitude about the whole thing. She meets Camilla, and basically she's told, okay, we have an assignment for you. So if you can do this assignment, the job is yours. You can get your life back, basically. And the assignment is to get photos of Anna Nicole Smith at a doctor's office because there's rumors going around that she's pregnant. So basically, she stalks Anna Nicole Smith at I believe
a gynecologist.
It was a gynecologist
office.
Because they have the same gynecologist, which is like, what? Why would you assume that you'll run into her there? Though?
I know. Like, it's wild that it worked out that way.
Well, she says they have the same gynecologist.
Yeah.
It's
a happy accident. But how does she know when Anna Nicole Smith is going to know?
Exactly. But she assumes she's going to run into her there somehow. It's so weird.
It's less coincidence and more Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, exactly. It's fate. She was meant to have this freaking story fall into her lap.
Or sitcom logic, as we call it.
Yeah, it is sitcom logic, 1000%. So she shows up at this doctor's office. It's like such a violation on the level of the Pamela Anderson situation that unfolded all those years ago. Like, people were very into just violating like women's, like, female celebrities back then, and like just finding them in their most personal, vulnerable states and just exploiting the shit out of it.
it was pretty hard to watch all of this with it being Anna Nicole Smith, because like I'm like, yeah, we as a society destroyed this woman.
Yeah.
Not fun to watch.
So, and she plays herself, which is like, you know,
it probably hadn't gotten that bad yet.
Yeah, it hadn't. Like, she was definitely in the tabloids already as someone, you know, but at the same time, you're right, Barry.
Hell, she didn't, like, this was, what, you said it was 90?
96 it premiered, so...
Like, she was dead almost 10 years later. Like, less than 10 years later. That's how sad it was to watch.
Very. So... Ultimately, Nora ends up stealing her urine sample.
And like taking photos of her in a
through
hospital gown.
Yeah, like
through
it's
a door.
just,
like,
it's so depraved.
And is proud of it. And, I don't know. I feel like there's an absurdist version of that would work, and none of it was there. Like, it was just like a car wreck.
Yeah, it was. It was hard to watch. And so... she gets the urine. She's basically now Camilla's favorite, and they run the urine test, and it turns out that she's not even pregnant or whatever. But it's just, you know, like she's set up for like ongoing assignments, and they're off to the races, and her downward spiral can begin, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. In this season of our podcast, we've been encountering this particular kind of challenge in sitcoms multiple times, which is, I think, what we identified before is where it poses the question, is it like too bad, like too dark, or is it not dark enough?
Yes.
Or to what you're saying, Barry, it's like there's a note of absurdity that you need to hit. You need to strike that chord just right. And this episode of this show does not strike that chord right. But in thinking about it, I'm like, I understand why actors and celebrities like Anna Nicole Smith would sign on to be in an episode of this, because on paper, the idea of a show that is a dark satire on the exploitative side of the media and the tabloid industry and all of that, and doing like a very harsh, it's kind of like really airing the dirty laundry of that whole machine. If you were to pitch that to her and say, okay, these are the kind of people that harass you, this is a show that's going to take them down a peg. This is a show that's going to make fun of that kind of tabloid journalism. I could see celebrities being like, cool.
Aaron, that's adorable that you think that much thought goes into this casting.
But that's right. But
this is like, it's a big show. It's on ABC. They're like, hey, you want to be on a big ABC show? Sure.
But I'm saying, if you were really thinking about it and you were like, do I want to be on this show? On paper, the concept makes total sense. In practice, there's something about the way they strike that chord in this episode that is not funny. It's uncomfortable. We know intellectually that it's supposed to be some sort of commentary, but it also still feels like it's not quite, doing that in the way where, like, it
would be fun.
It's weird.
It would be fun if there was a twist put on it, where the way she's able to get the scoops she like gets the trust of these people somehow. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that would be, instead of being so devious and like, the expected
that's
thing.
A genuine way to do it.
Yeah, where it's like kind of she finds her own back channel to get these stories. Like, I don't know, but it's just, I don't know. It's trash for the sake of trash.
Yes.
And it just, that is what things were like. And just like the bad humor, there's like a very homophobic joke like in that scene in the bathroom that I'm not even going to repeat. But like,
I didn't even clock it, so don't bother.
Yeah.
It was real bad, and it came in like the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, but it's like, this is where we were at. Like, this was the culture. And this is like the one thing that I think a lot of like younger people are not understanding, is just like, yes, we have like a long way to go as a culture in a lot of ways, and there's like a lot of problems, but you have no idea in like the span of the life of like an elder millennial, the kind of change that we have seen. Like, there's things that are said in these old shows that could not be said today
Yeah.
or even 10 years ago. Like, you know, it's just, it's wild how much has changed and how, you know, this is what has seeped into a lot of our brains. Like a lot of people watching television at the time, it not only like reflected what was going on in the world and how people were interacting with each other, but it also kind of helped form that and reinforce it.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing of like entertainment media is it holds a mirror up, but then it also reinforces the BS.
Yeah.
You know, like it also
This show is a museum exhibit on what it was
is.
like to be watching TV at that time.
Yeah.
And like, if you were to watch this show, and I'm not necessarily saying that you should, but if you choose to watch this show, this will give you an idea, 25 years ago of us as teenagers, the cultural cauldron that we...
Whoa. We were not teenagers in 1996.
I was.
Aaron was.
You were
13.
How old? You were 13. Okay. That doesn't count. Anyway, whatever.
What?
We were
It actually does.
But
Okay,
by 98,
okay.
when this show went off the air, I was 15.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, we grew up in a time, and that sounded
In
like
peak
the
sitcom.
opening. Yeah, the opening.
Yeah.
We grew up, but actually, we grew up in a time where the kinds of jokes in this show were very normalized, and so like this is a time capsule of some sort.
To piggyback on that, the more and more we do this show, the more and more I'm like, we did not grow up in peak sitcom.
Yeah.
Because things have gotten way better.
Well, actually, so when my meaning behind peak sitcom when I said that was not peak in terms of quality. It was peak in terms of
Them
quantity.
being a dominant.
What it really was is if you look at like Nielsen ratings from the 80s and 90s, the top ranking TV shows, any given time of the year, any given year, top 10 shows running on network television in North America, at least 5 out of 10 were sitcoms. And if you jump past the 90s, that's no longer the case. So the TV comedies that are being made today are great. They're not cracking the top 10. They're all pretty niche. The shows that were...
There's no such thing anymore.
Yeah, like nowadays, the shows that are like the water cooler shows are reality shows, maybe true crime stuff, maybe big budget drama, certainly still sports. There's lots of things that are like... As
far as televised events, like not streaming stuff, the tops now would be the big competition shows, as well as still NCIS.
Shows like that.
NCIS and
the NCISs and Laws and Orders and CSIs of the world.
FBIs, your 911s, those still do big
law
numbers.
Enforcement related fetishism. But but sitcoms in the 80s and 90s were the dominant genre.
Anyway.
And that's
this is quite...
Anyways, I was making an off-the-cuff joke.
I know. Well, okay. So back to talking about this pilot.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that scene where she's in the bar and she meets the group of other like tabloid photographer journalist types, and it's like it's such a classic, like they're sitting in a semicircle, let's go around and make all of the introductions, and they're all just, and that's sleazeball, and like she just...
Which one?
Well, all of them, but I'm thinking particularly the guy who like leans in and puts his arm around her, and what was that line that he had? Because he had her bag, he had her camera, and he's like, before I give it back to you, and he like, it's a very like
let's not even
we don't have
it's just gross. It's
gross.
Sleazy. And there's also a character introduced, Dave, who is in all 3 seasons, and I just want to say, like, I'm very confused about his character because I don't know how to say this. I'm going to try to be delicate, but basically he was written allegedly as actually having an intellectual disability, and the character's name is nicknamed Stupid Dave, which is horrible. You know, and gradually his character. So when they retooled it for the second season, they kind of dropped that and just made him like just a guy.
They reversed Joey'd him?
Yeah, they reversed Joey. Like they made him very just a run of the mill kind of quippy guy. And eventually he's like runs the company at one point. So, but it's just like, why would they even do that? And certainly the actor, and again, this is just based on the one episode, the pilot. He doesn't put on any sort of acting choice that would make you think he's parodying someone with. So at least he made choices that were not offensive.
Yeah, at least the actor didn't push it.
Yeah, I didn't take it as I didn't take it as him having any form of disability.
I
just thought it was
reading about it, that was very much one of the main points of the character, and I was like, what? Like,
so you asked why? Well, this show feels like it's kind of like, hey, there's the third rail. Let's touch it.
Yeah, it is. It's like, where else can we go with this? And I don't know.
But what I was gonna say about that scene that amazed me was after all of the introductions, and they're all super sleazy and positioned as kind of antagonists to her. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a ragtag group of
it's
like
very.
It's painting this specific picture of like what a group of tabloid photographers would be.
But it's very quick that they turn it around in that scene to she's on their side and they're all rallying together against the celebrities. Like, how dare these people make it so hard for us to take these very private photos of them and make it so difficult for us, and we deserve to be able to invade their lives, and the public deserves this information. And she is suddenly like on their team and on their side so hard.
Yeah, she flips.
She flips so hard.
And again, I remember when that scene started and it was just like, oh, we're going to meet, all the other tabloid sleaze guys. I had this weird thought where I'm like, this could be a funny scene. I could see. And like, I was just like, as I was watching it, I was like, there's so many funnier ways to write all of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like none of this, again, I stand by, like none of this is off limits. It just has to be better presented.
I also, I'd also love to shout out like Amy Ryan's character. It's kind of an interesting thing because she plays her former stepdaughter, but is...
Oh my God, I didn't even recognize her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
But she's actually like her age, so they're like best friends in that first season.
Yeah.
And then she's kind of just, they lost her in the retool. So she didn't carry over to the next season. That
was a funny idea. You're right. I did like that idea.
Yeah. Like she calls her mom at the start, and she's like, "You don't have to call me that anymore.
Call me what you called me before you called me mom."
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Was it Daddy's? Oh, I can't remember.
I don't remember.
It was bad.
Some crude.
Oh my God! Sorry.
Insert crude joke.
One of the only laughs I got in the entire pilot was the fancy restaurant that they track Anna Nicole Smith to. I just love the idea because it's such a Hollywood thing. It's just, the restaurant is just called Daddy. And I missed that. I just loved that. There was just a neon sign that said Daddy. And I was like, what a just great Simpsons-esque sight gag.
Yeah, that's funny.
I have to say, there were some funny moments sprinkled into the little bits that I ended up watching like a couple of scenes here and there of other episodes, and like it's not completely unfunny. Like it is like a funny, like clever show, and like the performances are spot on.
Yeah.
It's just that it is literally about the worst of the worst. But I just find it very interesting that so many executives and people really wanted this show to succeed. It's like it's like they killed it in the first season of ABC, but people were just dying to bring it over to NBC. And I think it had something to do with like Chris Thompson because of his reputation and because of Téa Leoni, because she was kind of like an it girl, like a comedy, like it girl at the time. Like she had been in a previous show, which I think we should try to cover at some point, called Flying Blind, where she had rave reviews in that role, but it was short-lived. Yeah. And then, you know, she was someone, you know, she had been in Bad Boys. She had been in like, you know, like a few things here and there. And like people really wanted her to see, they wanted lots of Téa Leoni. They wanted her out there. So they really pushed to have this show brought to the next, to the other network. And I don't know, I'd love to just like take just like a minute to like talk about the retool. So basically how they position it is like the Comet is bought by Les Polanski, who's played by George Wendt. So he is a successful owner of a meat empire. So it's kind of like a Jack Donaghy thing, like a 30, but he's a very different character. He's kind of this like, you know, he's kind of he's more conservative, but more socially conservative. And he really wants to push the direction of the magazine away from tabloids. So basically, immediately he's at odds with Camilla. So, you know, it's during this like retool that we meet like a lot of the other cast members.
And this was in the first season after the pilot?
This is in the second season, which again happened like a year later.
Oh, right.
So
that was the short season. Yeah,
it's very complex.
Gotcha.
So this is the short season, the mid-season thing, where it was like a random 13 episodes that were put on at NBC. And it's like...
it didn't get the back 9, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a huge jump in time later. So they lost, obviously, like some of the previous cast members, or they decided to, you know, get rid of certain cast members. But basically, this is kind of where people like Daryl Savad and comes into play here. It's basically like there's like a chunk of like sort of new people that are cycled in. And then when it's retooled once again, because basically there's like a few big mishaps that happen. Camilla and Nora end up in jail at the end of the second season. And after that, it's kind of like Camilla can't put up with the new Comet anymore. So she takes Nora and Dave, and they go to the National Inquisitor together, which was a fake
no, it's perfect
tabloid,
though.
But it's also like the name of a fake tabloid in The Simpsons, which is pretty funny. And so when they make that jump, there's a whole new set of people, which includes Jim Rash, Amy Hill, like Tom Verica, Chris Elliott. And Chris Elliott's character is named Bradley Crosby, and he's written as the illegitimate son of Bing Crosby. And then in one episode, he also finds out he's related to Hitler. So it's kind of like...
What?
Yeah, the episode's called Mine Way. I'll do it mine way, or I did it mine way. I'm like...
Wow.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. It's like... So, yeah, so they couldn't keep George Wendt. And they needed to keep a reason, or like they needed to make a reason that seemed logical. So basically, Camilla jumps ship.
They did a pre-tool.
Yeah, exactly. So
like back to the initial premise.
It's I don't know. It's very
a D-tool.
It's a
D-tool.
It's very all over the place and very complex. And I really do feel like this show we could do another episode about it. Or like a spin-off deep dive, because
I'm all right.
There's so much. Yeah, I know, but there's
that'll be one of those ones where you and Aaron revisit something and Barry's off doing his own thing.
Yeah, but it's like it has all of those things. It has the retools. It has the like up and down like nature. It has all the tropes. It has like this revolving door of characters. And honestly, it would have made sense if they stuck with the same setting because a lot of, I think, these photographers and people that work for these tabloids probably are freelancers that work for, so it would make sense if they want lots of people cycling in and out to just like do it that way. But anyway.
The other thing that I noticed in this show is that, the show is about tabloid journalism and about the way that celebrities' private lives get made public, whether they want it or not, and things like that.
Yeah.
But this show also has jokes within the show that are tabloid style jokes.
Yeah.
And they're made by people who work at a tabloid. So there's a logic to it, but it is also meta. So one of them that I noted in the first episode, and there are others, but the one that I wrote down is there's a Charlie Sheen joke, which was like pretty ahead of its time as far as like that specific of.
No, he was already a well-known philanderer at that point.
But he was known to also, use the services of sex workers because he was like on Heidi Fleiss's list in the early 90s.
You could have easily you could have slotted Hugh Grant in there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, like known to. I'm not saying that this show broke the scoop.
Yeah.
It's more just like the idea of plugging that kind of joke into a sitcom was something that was like, and I'm not saying ahead of its time in a good way, as a compliment, but it is something that like this show was trying to be a commentary about tabloid journalism, but also get laughs out of tabloid types of stories, like making jokes at the expense of celebrities.
I think, and let's get serious. I go to this well myself. I think just making lazy jokes about celebrities is just lazy writing, and that's just what lazy writers do. Sorry, everybody who was on the writing staff, but it's true.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. It's just.
Yes, Eleanor Roosevelt said it best.
I feel like it is like a very fascinating time capsule. Like that's like my biggest takeaway from like all of this is like, oh. Like this was like just the way things were. And it like there's a lot of like, even
still is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but like it was more brash and more out in the open back then. You know what I mean? Like it was way more
Tell you what, it was easier to separate back then. You could easily call something a tabloid and people were like, well, that's a tabloid. Whereas now, because so much of clickbait is coming from reputable sources half the time. You can't differentiate anymore.
Lines are more blurred.
Well, no.
Infotainment has become exactly like infotainment has been the watchword for like 20 years.
When I say that's just how it was back then, I'm not saying that we don't have trash media now, obviously. I mean more of the like sensibilities of the world. And like how people spoke to each other and how people talked about different things is like, and how, just like, it's just literally instead of social media and horrible YouTubers, we had like actual like publications putting this crap out, like it was just, it's just different. It was like the trash media that's like exploitative was just in a different format back then. I don't know.
There's one other element, which is that soon after this show went off the air, and I think this is further evidence of like the shift in that role that tabloid, like you're saying, tabloid journalism was very much its own thing. And then there's like a mainstreaming of the concept of tabloid and in some ways letting the celebrities in on the apparatus in a very different way that comes very soon after this. Because you start to see shows like the Paris Hilton show, The Simple Life, or a show like The Osbournes about Ozzy Osbourne and his family. Shows that are, let's get a direct peek, getting welcomed inside to the homes and lives of celebrities, where we kind of see the good and the bad and all the things, and we can both laugh at them and laugh with them, whatever it is. And as long as they're making a boatload of money off of it, that's somehow where we landed.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm not sure
I mean, Anna Nicole had a reality TV show.
And I'm not sure which was the first, but I was just doing some quick looks, and around 2002, 2003, you start to get just a tidal wave of those types of shows.
Yeah.
So like 3, 4, 5 years after this sitcom, it's just a pile-on.
And it never stopped.
And it never stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd love to talk a little bit. We don't have to go too far into it, but I'd love to talk about the...
Tell us about season 3 episode, I think it's 22.
22. So it feels like... So they made this episode. Apparently it never aired. It feels like they knew it was over and they wanted to end it in a very definitive way. And they chose like the most definitive way. And we'll get to it.
Yeah.
So basically, or indefinitive, I guess. Basically, there's this big call to action by Camilla to her entire team. She brings them all in on a Saturday. And she's basically like, okay, we need all hands on deck. We have a very important mission. We have to get photos of the Barbra Streisand, James Brolin wedding. And it's so funny because I remember this whole thing, right? Like, that was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
They were like
it was a really big deal.
Couple of that time. Like, it was like, because, you know, James Brolin was this like dashing, like, you know, like long time like actor. And then she was Barbra Streisand, the legend. And it was like this just... you know, this match made in Hollywood, like heaven, you know, like it was like everyone was so excited for this.
It was treated exactly the way this episode treats
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So it was very like of the time and very like prescient. Like they really were like, oh yeah, this is like, you know, the biggest story of the year. So, and I should also say that it opens in a very funny way.
Just do the plot and then go back to the opening.
Okay. So basically, they're trying to come up with a way to get there because the only way they're going to get onto the property, it's apparently at her Malibu property. And the only way they're going to get access to it is through the air because everything's going to be blocked off. She's a big deal. Like they're both big deals. So they, you know, they had all kinds of like ways to block off, like, you know, snoopers and press and all that. So they're like, okay, well, we can't get a helicopter. We can't get a plane. So, but, you know, right away, Suji drops like basically comes up with the solution, which is her boyfriend, Leo, who's played by Fred Stoller in this episode, who's very funny, very like iconic, like like character actor who's in anything and everything that you've seen. I'd love to
do a bonus episode one day just analyzing Fred Stoller's roles.
Oh my God. Yeah. So he plays her boyfriend, Leo, and he apparently runs a hot air balloon like company. So they decide they're all gonna get dressed up in formal wear because, of course, it's a black tie event. So the plan is that they're gonna all pile into this hot air balloon and land, and like I don't know I can't remember whether it was land in right on the property or nearby, and they were gonna cause a diversion. Like the Dave
they were gonna put Chris Elliott down as he was gonna parachute in as a diversion.
Yes.
And then they were gonna set up shop on a nearby cliff.
Yeah.
And take photos on Barbara's bad side.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a long telephoto lens.
Yeah. Because there was they made a whole meal out of the fact that they were going to shoot her from what Barbra Streisand has identified as her bad side. And like it was going to be this big win for all of them. And so they're all in formal attire, and pretty much the whole episode takes place in this fake hot air balloon because, of course, Leo is not actually qualified to be captaining this thing. Like he apparently had just
he's
done
unlicensed.
Yeah, he's unlicensed.
An amateur unlicensed hot balloonsman.
Yeah. And immediately they lose control, and it just like, you know, they're out to sea, and the implication for most of the episode is that they're doomed and that they're just waiting for the inevitable. And basically, it's like a lot of them kind of talking about it gets a little philosophical at certain points. And the whole time Camilla is kind of like becoming more unhinged. At one point she tries to jump out of the balloon, and she thinks she's gonna make it and swim to shore, so she's completely irrational. But then she, at the last minute, she's pulled back in.
She also almost murders the guy who's captaining it.
Yeah, she almost murders Leo and throws him out of the basket. And again, I cannot stress this enough. They're all in formal attire, and they're all wearing these like wacky, like the men are all wearing these like really ugly mid-90s tuxes with like the brightly colored patterned like bow ties and vests.
I liked that bow tie.
I hated it.
I really liked it. I thought it looked. I didn't
man.
like his frilly shirt, but I thought it was the black on black with that bow tie I thought it was very fashionable.
And in the final moments, they spend their time singing the song Sloop John B by the Beach Boys, and like with emphasis on the line, "This is the worst trip I've ever been on." And like, and it ends with them like their fate's uncertain. So we don't know if they die. We assume they do because it's like, a really bad situation. And they're basically over the ocean.
They're drifting out over the ocean, lost in a hot air balloon. And where it makes sense is like, if this is the last episode, it's ending on this very dark joke sort of note. But if it's not the if it's not the last episode, and if they did end up somehow getting renewed for another season, they could have been rescued.
Yeah, it's a classic case of like, we don't know the fate of the show, and every year we've basically been on the verge of cancellation. So might as well write an episode. Probably the same thinking of them going to jail at the end of season 2 is just them being like, this would be a funny way for it to end if we don't get picked up.
Yeah.
And it is.
Covers your bases.
Yeah.
It's a great end. It's a great end.
It is a great ending.
It's the fucking quantum leap ending, basically.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, what better way? Like, if you're by the end of this show, like kind of disgusted with these people, what a better way to end it? Because then you can just assume like, oh yeah, all these terrible people are going to perish in this freak accident, or not freak accident, an accident of their own design, of their own hubris and idiocy,
Yeah.
Like,
It is an accident of their own hubris and idiocy.
It is certainly taking a page out of the Seinfeld finale.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say,
which was written as a way of, calming everybody, having them get their comeuppance.
Yeah, which I was gonna say, both shows ended the same year.
Yeah.
Approximately the same time of the same year.
So we'll jump back to the cold open, because I actually thought that was pretty entertaining. Like, so the setup for the episode also is like you see Nora in bed with the character Jake, who is like, I guess, like a guy who she was having a will they or won't they throughout the series. He's another photographer. And basically, they've just had sex and they're all out of breath. And, they're saying, oh, that was incredible. That was incredible. But then the joke is, it's incredible how bad their encounter was. And they play it really well. I found it very entertaining. And they're like, oh, I didn't know sex could actually be this bad. Like, I didn't know that there was such a thing as something so bad. And then they're like, well, why don't we just try again? And then so you see like this, like there's this whole like passage of time thing where the implication is like they spend the rest of the, the sun rises and then they're like finished again. And they're like, oh, wow, that was worse. So it's like they just can't get it together.
They had sex all night and it was just all terrible.
All terrible. And so they're both just like so finding it so disheartening how it's possible, because I guess the implication is that they've had some build up, and they've had this chemistry together, and that they were inevitably going to hook up eventually. And then when they did, it was very disappointing. And
which it would be a great payoff to a will they, won't they relationship. Be very, very funny.
It was very subversive in that sense. But like in the hot air balloon, they kind of have like a bit of like a nice moment, like a little button.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, where I actually like, oh, well, good, good for them. Like they kind of just had this like,
he says this kind of poetic philosophical thing that's very like it's
like the most cliche,
it's cliche
thing he could have possibly
it's
said.
Cliche, but for a show like this,
they're laying it on thick. It's this schmaltzy thing, but the point is like obviously they're all feeling bad about themselves and talking about their regrets from their past.
Yeah.
Now that they think they're all doomed and drifting off to sea, they're talking about whatever things they regret. And she's just talked about the things that, she regrets not being able to do with the rest of her life. And he says this thing to try to make her feel better. And then they kind of have this little brief emotional connection. And then he has that line, which I wrote down, I think last night would have been different if we'd done this first.
That's what she says.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is an interesting line of just the idea that like, if they'd had this kind of emotional connection first before trying to sleep together, maybe the sleeping together part would have gone better.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting little
it was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's
and they sing the song, they drift off to sea, roll credits, music by Jonathan Wolfe.
It's a long fade to black. It is a fucking Sopranos black.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. And the show takes place. It's like there's the scene, and there's like the 5-minute bad sex joke. There's a couple minutes in the office, and then the rest of it's in the hot air balloon.
Yeah.
It's weird because like they were so into this premise of the hot air balloon that it was just so weird that like at no point is there ever an attempt to like try to fix their situation. Like they don't
like to change course of the balloon.
They don't try to land. There's no apparatus.
Yeah, it's a very hot air balloons are very dangerous. Like my uncle was in a horrific hot air balloon accident, and he like told us this tale like a few years ago. Like he like it was just horrible. Like he survived that. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but not because of that accident. Like he survived a hot air balloon accident. And it, it's a really bad situation. If you're in a hot air balloon and it goes off course, you're fucked. Like it is really, really bad news.
The thing,
true.
Other people
but there's also
hurt.
There are things on hot air balloons that can change this, whereas this set had none of those things.
They don't even try
but I
to fix the situation.
No one knows how to fix it. I think that's like the point, is because like Leo is useless.
I have things I could have tried.
Yeah.
Well, like it starts off with the idea that they gave him the coordinates of what direction he should fly it in, and he screwed up the coordinates. So they're, instead of flying toward Malibu, they're flying off course over the ocean. And it's like, okay, so step 1, turn around, like literally do a 180, maybe. Just that's a start. It's something. I don't
remember how it went down in the scene, though, but I'm pretty sure, like, Camilla was, like, mad with, like, her, with power in the moment, and was like, no, we're not going to turn back. We have to see this through. She was dead set on... and
they're heading straight out of the ocean.
Yeah, so it's...
I don't know. The whole thing, has a... there's a dark comedy sort of thing. I don't know. I can't make a good like literary reference to this, although I'm sure they exist. But it feels like pretty early on in the story, it shifts from, it's not about them trying to get out of this sticky situation or trying to overcome this problem. It's about like their resolved to their fate. And it's about kind of unpacking philosophically the choices they've made in life. It shifts to that moment, like that point, very quickly. So it's kind of like the opposite of how in the pilot she breaks bad so quickly. In this case, it's like as soon as they're like, oh, this is a sticky situation, well, I guess we're all doomed. Let's all just get whatever we have to off our chests.
I knew where it was heading, and not in a cliched way, just more like how the writing did kind of switch. I was like, okay, I see I see we're heading to an ambiguous end here.
I feel
And,
like,
yeah.
yeah. I feel like if, I were in that situation, I would love to hear everyone's deathbed confessions. That would be like,
I know you would.
I want the hot goss of your life. I want to hear the fucked up things you did while you were, living and like, and
well, and isn't that exactly what would make sense for those characters? It's a very live by the sword, die by the sword sort of ending.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think like that episode, as far as like striking that chord that balances the dark humor with the sentimental bits, the silliness with the like more like character comedy, did it pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it
There's
made me.
a Titanic joke. Did you guys?
Yeah.
Did we catch? Yeah. Did we catch it? Really?
Yeah.
The giant set piece? Yeah,
Yeah.
we might have.
But it's definitely it delivers on the premise better than the pilot did. That's for sure.
It made me revisit an idea that I've mentioned many, many times. Is that oftentimes when we watch pilots are often not great examples of a show because usually it takes some time to tinker and get there. This episode made me go, maybe some of these characters would have been worth hanging out with somewhat, if maybe I had seen more. But it's such a bad pilot that it's hard to.
Yeah.
I'm curious where the show is at the end of the first season, at the point when the network that initially created the show dropped it.
Yeah.
But NBC decided to pick it up. And, we don't...
I'm dying to know the machinations behind all of that. Like, I feel like I need to do more of a deep dive.
That's the hot goss I want, is when a show moves from one network to another.
Like, what? What are the backroom deals that happen?
What are the circumstances there?
Like...
But it also has to make me wonder, and I don't know enough about how that side of the industry works to know, but this show did have some real talent in it. And Téa Leoni, you can tell it's one of those things like we've talked about when you see like early shows with Jennifer Aniston sort of thing, where like the show might be crap, but you can see the star power in its lead. Like you can tell in the pilot that she, pops on camera. Like you can tell she's got the like energy.
Holland Taylor.
Holland Taylor too. Yeah, you can see the star power, the star quality, and so part of me is like, did NBC pick up this show just so they could like get Téa Leoni into the fold and thinking?
No, I think it was.
Even if this show fails, her next show will be with them.
I vaguely remember like a promo for this new season where it was like some jingle that was all about Téa Leoni.
Yeah.
It was like,
all the NBC commercials with the peacock logo and her in the white room.
I think it might even have been like La Bamba, but with Téa Leoni or something stupid like that.
Now, of course, joke might be on them because, and I'm not trying to step on any toes of your spinoff that you'll do later.
Yeah.
But I had to look because of this theory. She never did another sitcom after this.
No.
Not even a single episode.
She just did, she did movies and like
drama.
Dramas. So we'll get into it. Like, yeah, it's very, I don't know. It's very interesting. Like it was kind of like she probably burned herself out doing this type of show.
Well, when you do something and it's not very well received or it struggles the whole way through its run.
Also, it's like, I was going to include some excerpts from some reviews from the time, but I found them so hard to read because they were all talking about her appearance as well. Like they all like just spent so much time talking about her appearance.
What's wrong with her appearance?
No, like either objectifying her or being like, well, she's not as attractive as Brooke Shields, who's on a very similar show. Because Brooke Shields was in Suddenly Susan at the time,
which also wasn't a good show.
It's like there's too much time spent by these like male TV critics talking about how her looks, like just talking about her as like a pair of legs and whatever. And I'm just like, okay, guys, like
it's also in the promos for the show and the artwork.
Yes. The artwork is literally her. Like, it's such a dumb joke. It's like,
the season 3 promo?
The
no,
poster
the
of her naked.
poster for the show is like her naked, posed to like, like the typical 90s, like
sitting on the floor, legs crossed.
Yeah, so you can't see anything, but she's naked. Like, it's like, like the naked truth. It's like a literal interpretation of that.
It's a pretty obvious way for a promo team to go, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
But it's an easy sell, sure.
Yeah.
One thing that, comes to mind, because we were talking about this, Brynn and I, recently, like this idea that this show brings up again, the like, if something is a character like too bad or not bad enough, that whole thing.
Yeah.
Or like, how do you show a character get their comeuppance? Or like, how do you show the like editorial bent of the show in the context of a dark comedy type of deal? And I very recently watched an episode of Seinfeld that I think did this super well, and I was talking to Brynn about it, and she's like, yeah, you should go back and re-reference what we talked about with the George Carlin show and mention this. And I think it makes sense in the context of this show to bring it up now. So after we did our episode on the George Carlin show, and we were talking about how he does the whole thing where he takes advantage of a blind person in his taxi, and the show kind of celebrates him as a character, and the other patrons in the bar are giving him an applause. So anyway, the point is, we talked about that whole thing. I don't have to reiterate all of it, but the idea that in that show, he acts badly, but at the end of the episode, he gets his way, he's happy, and like half the people in the bar clap for him, right? They're all on his side. Seinfeld, the handicap spot episode, George Costanza parks his car in a handicap spot at the shopping mall, and the comeuppance comes swiftly and it comes hard, and his bad choices are not celebrated. His own friends tear into him for it, or like make fun of him for it, and make fun of how badly he gets his comeuppance. They come out of the mall, and there's an angry mob of people surrounding the car, furious. There was a woman in a wheelchair who got injured or got into some accident in the parking lot because she had to go up a steep incline because they took this parking spot. And there's an angry mob that is ready to rip George Costanza limb from limb. And then they all like cower in fear, go hide out in like a donut shop, come back later after dark. The angry mob is gone, but the car is destroyed. They've absolutely massacred his car. And even worse, he borrowed the car from his dad and now has to explain to his dad, as a grown man who borrowed a car from his dad, and has to explain why the car has been totaled. Like it's a write-off. And I love the line from Jerry, who just looks at it and smirks, and he's like, good body shop can buff out a lot of these scratches. Like, no one cares about the consequences George is suffering for this. They know he deserves it. Like, no one cares. And his dad does volunteer work for an organization that helps out people, like gives wheelchairs to people. And just like the whole rest of the episode is just everything getting shittier and shittier for George. Yeah. Because of these actions. Yeah. So it's just, that's a show where, we always talk about like what we like about it. But yeah, I'm just analyzing, like, this is the thing. You can do the dark joke about the person who makes these bad choices, but there needs to be the joke needs to be on them.
If you're gonna go there, you have to like, it better be good. It better all, like, I don't know.
It better be good.
It better be well thought out, is my point. Out. Yeah, if you're going to go dark, you better, like, have it well thought out in terms of, like, how it's paid off, like, how, like, whose side are you on? Like, you gotta really, like,
the joke
be careful with it.
The joke needs to be on them. So you
can't be careless with edgy humor or edgy writing. You have to be very.
It's with comedy writing. It's just don't punch down. Don't punch down.
Exactly. Don't punch down.
And the thing is, like, doing a joke in Seinfeld where he parks in a handicap spot, that joke in and of itself is punching down. But then a minute later, you realize, no, the joke isn't at the expense of the handicapped person. The joke is at George's expense because he's a piece of shit. And then the whole rest of the episode is all about that. And it's very obvious that the joke is on him. And George Carlin in that scene, the problem is that the joke isn't on him at the end. And in the pilot for this show, for a brief moment, like when she steals the urine, but then accidentally spills it into the inside of her purse, I was like, okay, build on that. Let's see how this gets much worse for her. And I was like, if this now becomes an epic downward spiral of how everything goes badly for her, and then maybe we've got something. But that's not where it goes. Yeah. That's just not where it goes.
I mean, she gets her comeuppance at the end of the series if we're to assume that she dies in that hot air balloon.
Sure, years later, they all get their comeuppance. But...
Well, it is implied that Anna Nicole Smith probably beats the shit out of her at the end of the pilot.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so that joke where she gets into the elevator, Anna Nicole Smith is in there, that's a kind of funny moment.
Yeah.
As the elevator doors are closing, she turns and notices her, and she's like, help! But the doors are shut, and she's gone. Cut to credits.
Yeah.
Yeah, the episode has a few jokes that work. It's just tonally, they didn't manage to, like, get that across the board.
Yeah. They didn't do the George Costanza's car getting totaled.
And the whole thing of how this is amidst them writing the pilot for the show Jerry, and they had come up with the plot where the guy gets into a car accident and doesn't have insurance, so the judge makes him become the guy's butler, and George doesn't have insurance or the money to pay his dad back for the car, so instead he has to become his dad's butler. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah, chef's kiss. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, Brynn, how does the naked truth connect with Friends?
I mean, how doesn't it? It connects very thoroughly in many 1 degree connections. I didn't go beyond 1 degree because I just,
That's fine.
There was a lot. I went down a real rabbit hole with this show in general.
One of your classic rabbit holes?
I was very light on my research for these segments, but basically, there's several 1 degree connections. So here are all the actors that appeared or co-starred in both shows. So we have Jim Rash, Amy Hill, Daryl Savad, Larry Hankin, Morgan Fairchild, Conchata Farrell, and Fred Stoller. They all did at least 1 episode of Friends and at least 1 episode of The Naked Truth. When they moved over to NBC, as you can imagine, there were a lot of the same directors. So there's like a lot of people from that pool of directors, like sitcom directors at NBC, including Pamela Fryman, Gail Mancuso, Michael Lembeck, and Robbie Benson. So, yeah. So Robbie Benson actually was like the main director of this show. He did like 14 episodes. So, yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of, and those are all 1 degree. I could have done more in terms of lesser degree, but if we've got this many 1 degrees, it's like there's going to be many little incestuous connections.
Yes, it's enmeshed.
It's enmeshed, yeah, especially because, like it went over to NBC. So a lot of the talent, a lot of the creative talent is going to be, there's going to be a lot of cross-pollination there happening. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Spin off.
Yeah. So I honestly, again, don't really want to, I'm not interested in doing an epic list because just the people that I read off, like, you guys all know what they've been up to. Like, the short answer is everyone did fine after this. Everyone worked in TV comedy. Everyone, made great careers for themselves. There was a couple of like little interesting things that like jumped out in that a couple actors that were in this show became prestige actors, including like Amy Ryan. Like, of course, she's done tons of comedy as well. Like, she was like famously in The Office as Holly Flax, but like she's done so many incredible dramatic roles. Same with John Hawkes, who was in a couple episodes of this.
Nice.
And then yeah, speaking of prestige, Matthew Weiner wrote 2 episodes of this before creating the modern masterpiece Mad Men. So he wrote 2 episodes, including the final episode that aired of The Naked Truth.
He did a lot. Yeah, he did a lot of sitcom writing.
Yeah. So, I mean...
And then he hopped over to Sopranos.
Like, the only one that I actually kind of, like, listed out was Téa Leoni, and Aaron already touched on this. So basically, she had already done a couple of feature films at the time that she was in this show, but she really picked up steam with that, like, after. So after she was done with The Naked Truth, she was in The Family Man, Spanglish, Fun with Dick and Jane, and basically, like, one of her biggest TV roles after the fact was in Madam Secretary, where she played the Secretary of State, Elizabeth McCord, and she starred in that show from 2014 to 2019, and I feel like, you know, we're still going to see her in plenty of things because she is a talent. She has quite a talent and quite a presence. So she's not going anywhere. And basically everyone involved, like, was so talented that they all popped up, you know. And like, if you're a regular listener of our podcast, you know, you can just revisit old episodes to get the credits of so many of these other people, like, you know, like Amy Hill, we've talked about like a couple of times. Like, she's been in like so many things, including...
yeah, she's on Davis Rules.
Yeah, she's, you know, she's been out there.
Yeah, I propose that one day we do...
Chris Elliott, like, obviously.
One day we do a little, like, kind of bonus mini-series or side series that's like 'Twas All-Stars.
Well, actually, I did kind of...
look at these actors.
I did kind of find it, like, so Robbie Benson, as I mentioned, who directed most of The Naked Truth, he directed like 3 other 'Twas shows. He directed for Muddling Through, Good Advice, and Pearl. And then when I started kind of going down that rabbit hole, I was like, well, a lot of these other directors directed multiple 'Twas shows because that was just the thing. Like, you were just, if you were a director in that time period doing single cam sitcoms, you were going to get recruited to do everything. Like, so you were going to,
These are 3 cams.
Oh, sorry, 3 cams. Sorry. Yeah, single cam. That's not even close to being a single cam. 3 cam. Yeah, you're going to get to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, Mancuso still works a lot.
Yeah. She's totally like a legend. Yeah. So it's truly nothing about this show slowed anyone down. Everybody kept in, including Chris Thompson. He had other shows, like he created the show Action, which we've also talked about, and like he's like worked on tons of other stuff.
That makes sense. That makes sense. There's a similar vibe to it.
A similar vibe. Yeah, similar.
That one's a one where I would say the dark comedy works a lot better.
Yeah, maybe he refined it by then.
Yeah, that's
he
also
had some time to reflect on it.
It's also Jonathan Wolfe.
Yeah. He also did the music for that. So yeah, I mean, everybody kept going, even though this show was like one of those like weird occurrences of like, okay, let's this thing is dying, but let's keep like bringing it back to life. Let's see what we can do to like keep it fresh. And it's like, no one wants it. Just get rid of it. Just let it die. Just let it die like they die in the stupid hot air balloon.
But one thing we've been doing more of in this season as well is looking at these shows that lasted like 50 episodes.
Yeah.
And I know by today's standards, 2023 standards.
Yeah, that's a lot of episodes.
50 episodes may sound like a lot.
Yeah.
In the mid-90s, that's not anything.
Yeah.
That's
because this show did 2.5 seasons.
Yeah, 2.5 seasons was not considered a success at that time, and it's not enough to get to the syndication level. It's probably not enough that you ever got that DVD box set. It just sort of like...
I think it was like you had to hit 100. Like, I think I was listening to Office Ladies.
That's for syndication.
For syndication. Yeah, if you hit 100 episodes, then I've
heard it put as 100 episodes. I've also heard it put as 5 seasons, which would be approximately 100, 110 episodes.
100 episodes was a standard, and basically a lot of that's when you would start getting shows that had shorter seasons would start adding bonus episodes into their seasons so they could manage to get themselves to 100 by the end of their fifth season.
And that's where it's fascinating when a show lasts 50, 55, 60, because you've invested enough in it for this much time. And if you squeezed out another couple seasons, you would at least be able to, get a future run of residuals and all of that through syndication. But it's a point where, a network is deciding to kind of, what is it, the sunk cost fallacy? Like they're cutting their losses or something. But it's interesting to look at these shows that managed to last this long, but where they decided not to let it go that little bit longer. These shows that lasted like 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah, because it's a whole other oat bag than those shows that lasted like 5 episodes, where it's obvious they're just like, that's it.
Let's cut our losses.
Dump it, shut it down.
Yeah.
Whereas these are clearly shows where they were like grappling with it, they're toying with it, or it gets moved from one network to another, it gets retooled, and they're just like, no, we just want to see if we can make this work. Let's just try a little bit harder.
Whereas there's other shows that are legendary for not having gotten a chance.
Yeah.
So it's so weird. Like, what shows are everyone championing, which is inexplicable, and what shows are just being let die that don't deserve it? It's just such a weird thing to think about. And in terms of I'm just curious about both of your takes on this idea of how many episodes per season. Like in this streaming age, we always have a lot less, obviously. No one's doing
22.
Nobody does 22 anymore.
Yeah, no one does
that. Network shows still do, but do
but
more than 22.
How do you feel about that as a television viewer? I think I like a good 10 episodes. I don't think I like less than 10 because it feels not satisfying enough. I always want more. So I feel like 10 to 12 is a good number for me, at least.
It just depends on what the story calls for.
Yeah, I guess.
Me. I mean,
sometimes you don't even notice it,
Yeah, I feel like, there's a lot of shows that are in that 10 to 13, whatever episode range now. And these are obviously they have big budgets and there's a high level of polish. Yeah. They're shot like movies. It's a totally different style of production. But I don't know, part of me misses the big 22 episode season of a comedy.
Right.
And it only works with certain styles of there is something about the shows that did it well.
Yeah.
Where you got to spend most of the year, other than the summer, hanging out every week with these characters.
I think shows like The Office, The Good Place, the Parks and Rec did a good job. There's
Good Place never did more than 10 to 12 episodes.
See, I never even noticed. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But I guess those were really high budget. Yeah, there's probably a maximum of 45, 50 episodes of The Good Place. Like modern sitcoms that I've enjoyed that are network sitcoms, some of them I found really repetitive. I found after a while, I would get really bored with the Goldbergs. I enjoy that show in general. I find it to be a very delightful show with a lot of heart. But I found it.
It's not what anybody who works on it says.
Oh, really? I didn't know that was is it a bad work environment, allegedly?
Well, Jeff Garland got thrown off for being a complete piece of shit.
Oh, shit. I didn't know that. Okay, I gotta look into this. But the show itself is I found it very entertaining, but after a while I was okay, this is getting tedious. This is too many episodes. This is way too many episodes.
I'd like to point out that The Office did seasons that were at its sort of, let's call it at its peak, seasons 5, 6, 7, 26 episodes.
Wow.
Per season.
And I always found it very satisfying. I never, that's what she said.
And there are some episodes where they're kind of phoning it in and it feels like the plot is a little rushed, but the bulk of them are well written, well thought through.
But again, we say these as modern shows, but I mean, The Office has been off the air.
I know, it's true.
12 years,
20 years,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a single cam, quote unquote mockumentary style sitcom Doesn't have the live studio audience. Doesn't have that
What
whole...
about Arrested Development? Did that ever have like full 22?
I don't think so.
Arrested Development.
That was the one I was
Aaron,
struggling.
don't worry about it, Aaron. I can do it. I know I know.
You're looking it up?
No, I just know.
He's pulling from his brain.
Arrested Development had a full first season of 22 episodes.
Yeah.
And then, so Arrested Development would have had a very similar run to The Naked Truth in that it never got good ratings, except it did get good publicity. It never got good ratings, so they brought it back for a second season, like basically, we'll give it another go. They gave him 18 episodes. Then the third season, they gave him 13 episodes, and then it famously was canceled and was off the air for about a decade. Came back with whatever the hell weird format Netflix had for their first season, which was like 16 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Then season 5, they did do almost 20 episodes, but they split it up over like 3 years. So
yeah.
So it started in that realm of like a 22 episode season, even though it changed
we were
after.
It was a network show. That's what networks ordered, right?
Yeah.
None of the shows, the Goldbergs is a great example because that's a modern example of a network sitcom.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's just interesting that networks, even as they shifted from the multicam with the studio audience to the single cam, initially they kept that run of trying to do like a 22 episode season. Yeah. And over time, that kind of fell apart. But it wasn't an immediate like, we're changing camera formats.
It's too
so
and stuff. It's just too...
Arrested Development was shot on film. It was an expensive to produce show. It had stars in it.
And like most modern sitcoms, like, whatever Tim Allen has on now, I feel like Kevin James doesn't have anything on right now. But whatever, like, that style of comic has on the air, we'll typically still do 20 episodes a season. So that's still happening. It's just not necessarily, that's not the standard that necessarily most of us would watch.
How about I throw it to you, Aaron? Any leftovers?
You know what? Maybe not. Let me have a quick scan here of the notes. But I said off the top I didn't have that many notes this time. I had a lot to say, but not that much that I had to write down. I don't know. I wrote down that I thought, considering how much screen time it had, the green screen work wasn't that great.
Yeah.
It got better as the episode went on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as they had the background, like the sky kind of change for passage of time as the sun goes down. And I think it started to look better toward the latter part. But
they really nailed the sky from Titanic.
Yes, they did. They did. Just to set it up, like in the basket, basically, what's his name? Basically poses with Camilla in the Rose and Jack I'm flying moment. And yes, it looks exactly like the sky in the movie. So it was well done. Yeah. I mean, I have one left over. Just, I mentioned I would come back to this. 2 separate actors play Leland Banks, who is Nora's ex-husband. The first being Michael York, as I also mentioned, and the second one being Ian McShane. And Ian McShane...
Awesome!
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, so Ian, like the episode with Ian McShane actually is one where Nora briefly has like a fling with him. Like, so she briefly is like, trying to be his friend again. And then I think they end up sleeping together or something. But it's like a very... Yeah.
That'd be just before a couple of years before Deadwood there.
Yeah. So so it's kind of neat. But I really like Michael York as well. I find him to be like a classic sort of, he's like that very well-groomed, like gentleman, like British gentleman type. So, so there are 2 very different takes on the same guy. Like,
I can see like mid to late 90s Ian McShane being a
Yeah.
a handsome posh Brit.
Yeah. But in more of a rugged way. Like he's more of a I don't know. It's just different. It's just very different.
My one leftover was just we didn't really get to talk about it all that much, but as is the case always, Jim Rash kind of like walks away and just steals every scene that he's in. So
yeah, that's true. Good point.
Jim Rash was doing some real character work here, and like just like he's doing a voice, and it's I just love Jim Rash.
It's
future Academy Award winner Jim Rash.
I enjoy seeing him in things where he's like a different character from the Dean, because I feel like he's always just like associated in my mind to that character, and I'm like, oh, he's a delight, and he can do lots of other characters.
He's just so funny.
Yeah, he's
just
very
so
funny.
Okay, let's give Mr. Producer a quick call and see what he has to say.
Hey, kid, what's the squirt?
Oh, hey, Mr. Producer. Sorry, I'd kind of gotten used to Raleigh screening your calls.
Ah, yeah. Kid's got a day off. He's rehearsing some lines for some big project he's got coming up.
Oh, is he an actor? I didn't know that.
Ah, well, he's just a small part. Gotta start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure he's been working hard at it.
Very new. He just called up his uncle. He talked his way into it.
His uncle?
Freddie Prinze Jr. I know what you're thinking. And yeah, he is one of those necro babies the Instatox love right now.
That's not the term.
So, what are y'all talking about today?
Today we're talking about the naked truth.
Oh, sure. That one ruffled some feathers when it was on the air.
Did it?
Well, us Hollywood folk, we got what you might call a complicated relationship with those Panzerotti paparazzi people,
Naturally. Have you had many encounters with them over the years?
Sure. No more than the next fella. Mostly a good guy, but, I got my bad boy side too, Sometimes you just, sometimes you call them up, you get the stars a little bit of leeway, but I had a bit of a rebellious period myself, kind of mid-90s, going through one of those, three-quarter life crises. I'm hanging around with Matt Bopp a little too much. Also hanging out with little Matty Dillon and slightly less little Matty Perry. You know what they call us in those days? The Matt Pack and Tony.
I did not know that.
They also, Tony and the Mats, kind of like the Tony and the Mats. Wild days, Kick, wild days.
Okay, well, anything happening with your show?
That's it. Really taking our time on this premise. We're looking at a new concept that I think is a real winner. Kind of think like Cheers, you got the bar and the rowdiness and the supporting colorful cast of characters, but instead of a Ted Danson former baseball player running the bar, it's, former Canadian astronaut Roberta Bondar.
Oh, well, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, well, we're just waiting back to hear from little Bobby Bondar's people, but I got a great feeling about this one. Until next time, kid.
All right, see you next time.
Well, that was the naked truth, huh?
Yeah.
That was that one. I will 100% forget that we covered this show, and we'll pitch it again in the future. But
I'd do a follow-up. I've already said.
Yeah, I think if you chose just the right episode that has like an interesting cameo in it, I could maybe get behind like
a rewatch.
One of our bonus rewatches.
Second chances.
Oh.
Not bad. Not bad. Yeah, well, it was a show that we were going to talk about at some point, and I think, we've got a lot of interesting analysis of the era out of this one.
Yeah.
Cross it off the list.
Yeah. We got to find the 80s version of that.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
What would
where
that-
it's
yeah.
as much of a. But we're not old enough to know what life was like in the 80s.
Not truly.
Not truly. Like we were like little toddlers and zygotes, you know, like we weren't.
Zygotes.
we were barely like, I feel like in the 90s, even my grasp of the 90s is like what TV I watched in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I know about the outside world.
Yeah.
But status report on our archaeological dig through sitcoms of the 80s and 90s. The number one question I get when I talk to anyone who has listened to our podcast or I've told them about the podcast is they ask how many episodes we've done. And when I tell them, they think that we might like imminently run out of shows to cover. Like, how could there be that many failed or forgotten sitcoms from just those 2 decades? And every time I research one of these shows,
another one comes up. There's an endless supply.
I find 3 or 4 more every time. We are racking up shows that we could talk about faster than we can make episodes.
Oh, 100%.
On that note, let's cut to credits.
That Was a Show is created and hosted by Brynn Byrne, Andrew Barry Helmer, and myself, Aaron Yeger. It's a production of Radio Gizmo in Toronto, Canada. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. Follow us on Instagram and tell your friends about it. That Was a Show?
Radio Gizmo.